Another opportunity to catch up with our media professional Steve Carey in the former studio. Welcome back. Since you and I talked last, 1,000 things have happened. The world's changed yet again. There are hostilities between Armenia and between Azerbaijan. Geopolitics being played out on a huge scale. And of course, let's not forget, we've got the incredible happenings of the election, the American election, the presidential election. We've already had one tremendous debate, or was it a debate? And of course, back home, we've had the possibility of introducing in Victoria an omnibus bill. What have you made of that?
I think it's absolutely outrageous, and I think a lot of people have found a similar viewpoint. I mean, to have an omnibus, a grab bag of politics, a grab bag of new laws that are just going to be passed because we're in a COVID pandemic stage 2 that was largely brought on by the ineptitude and the failure of managing stage 1 is beyond the pale for me. But what really worries me is that the government thought this could even fly. Yep. Attorney General Jill Hennessy, I mean, who came up with this? Where did the seed of this one germinate? If we look at the hotel inquiry, it backfires. We'll never know because there'll be collective amnesia again.
Well, we've got Andrew Crisp now saying that what he said at the inquiry, he'd like to retract. What have you made of that comeback?
Well, I agree with Neil Mitchell today, who said we are now moving inexorably towards a Royal Commission. And I think if you look at it, if people can't voluntarily come back and present before this commission, then we should have a Royal Commission because we need answers. And we're not getting any answers. What we're getting is a massive tidal wave of obfuscation and lies and deceit. Now, I'm not saying anyone in particular, that would be libelous, but I think generally if you look at that, we've come away with more questions than we got answers. So I think we are moving towards a Royal Commission. Nobody wants to see money spent willy-nilly, but we've already spent millions now. I know we have to wait for the results of this commission, and maybe there will be some very salient findings. But at the moment, if you look at the backtracking that's now coming, and coming thick and fast, from the main players, it doesn't give you a lot of hope that we're going to get the answers that a lot of Victorians need and demand and are waiting for.
21 weeks ago, we began this journey called TheInformer. And you and I talked about 1,000 things. We also talked about the initial stance taken by the Andrews State Government in Victoria and how it embraced the challenge, and how well it got out on the front foot, and how well its messaging was tracking. What's happened in the last 21
Well, the
weeks?
wheels have fallen off. The wheels have totally fallen off, and I think there's a wonderful saying, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And I'll put my hand on heart and say I was right up there saying it had been handled really, really well, that Daniel Andrews was playing a fantastic political strategic game, that he was showing real leadership, that the messaging was strong. But what you see, and I think what's changed dramatically, is that passing parade of people at the Commission. And I think a lot of people, certainly people like me and the people I talk to, we've lost a lot of faith. And when you lose trust, it's the same in the news game. When you lose trust, very, very hard to get it back. Now, I said last time I was on here, I didn't think it was the right strategy for the Premier to continually front every single day when it's the same message. Give us something new. Let the other people, let the other ministers talk, perhaps. We're now in this cycle that's become so entrenched that it's like shifting the Titanic. You can't really move it much now, George. But I would still urge that strategy and that approach. If I was advising the Premier, I would say people need reassurance, and I know you're trying to give it that. And it's like, you know what, I use this analogy. It's like marriage. You don't get married to get divorced.
No.
Sometimes it happens, but you don't get married to get divorced. And with this, I'm not saying for a second that the Premier is doing anything but trying hard. That would be nonsensical. But we demand and we deserve better. And I think better can be done and should be done.
You touched on the word divorce. There has been a divorce already. We saw the health minister during this pandemic step away, and she did it in a manner that was quite surprising, by a tweet to the Premier saying, "I'm gone."
Well, that was extraordinary, wasn't it? I mean, you talk about old school and new school. I mean, the old school way I was brought up was you face to face the person, you give them the courtesy, even if you've had a discourtesy to you. Two wrongs don't make a right. That's what my mother always said and still says. It's very hard to live by that these days when it's so easy to just, I'm angry, text. I'm upset, tweet. But as taxpayers, we deserve better. And the media's role in all this, because that's what we're here to talk about, the media's role is to continually try to probe and push without fear and favour. And I've read with some measure of discomfort that certain journalists within the press gallery are now getting hounded on Twitter and on social media for doing their job, for asking hard questions. I would say the press pack need to ask more hard questions. They need to be chasing ministers. They need to be probing. We need to be supporting that, not fractured. And this is what happens. We've fractured into these two tribes of far left, far right. Where's the middle ground? How can I persuade you with the force of my argument and questions rather than you browbeating me saying, no, Steve, you're wrong? We don't get anywhere with that.
Well, there's another element that's added to this. Social media has come to the support of the Premier. And if you're...
Social media.
Okay.
I stand with Dan is the hashtag.
There are a number of new themes and memes that have come out, which is quite extraordinary. How do you expect the media to cover that?
I expect the media to do what the media should do without fear and favour. If there's a fantastic meme that's gathering traction and it's part of the discourse of daily media consumption, then I want to see it, of course I do. If I want my news traditionally, I still want to watch the main 6 o'clock news. I want to pick up The Age or the Herald Sun or tune to the ABC. And what I expect is that they will give me part of that meal. And I've talked about this before. No single news outlet can be all things to all people because you either work in television or print, or even though they're multi-channel these days, you still have to have a broad diet of media. And I've talked about that.
Because they give you a different perspective.
Because they give you a different perspective. I've banged on about this so often, and it should be said again. So where do we get that? I don't mind. I follow Dan Andrews. I follow the opposition. I follow Michael O'Brien on Twitter. But it takes a little bit of work. You can't expect everybody to be spoon feeding you all the time, George. There does need to be a certain level of engagement so that you're able to sit there and go, you know what, I don't like what that person's saying, but I'm willing to listen because it will inform me better. So when I was in the newsroom, I didn't consider myself far left or far right. My job was to get the information and let the cards fall where they wilted. Now, we find some journos, or perceptionally, building card houses so that they will deliberately fall left or right. And the public's picking up on that. You're either considered a left-wing commentator or a right-wing commentator. And therefore, you've got two tribes of people following you. It's nonsense. What we need is a vibrant, strong media with the balls and the courage and the intelligence to start to really probe, not just politicians, but industry leaders, sporting officials. You know, there's a lot going on at Essendon at the moment we don't know about too.
There's players leaving.
There are players leaving, so there's got to be a reason. So what I would say, the danger to journalism and the danger to journalists too is the pack mentality, where you are so hamstrung by developing such tight contacts that you're then conflicted. Do I do that story because it's going to potentially wreck that relationship and that friendship that I've developed? I remember when I started out in Queensland, we used to chase Joe Bjelke-Petersen, the then Premier, Police Minister Russ Hinds, Transport Minister Donikian. We were relentless, absolutely relentless. And you could say back in the day, Bjelke-Petersen used the media as a whip. Remember the old, hey, come here and feed the chooks. I remember going to his property at Kingaroy, feed the chooks.
That's right.
Feeding the chooks, which were the journalists, the
or
media.
whatever there was,
What we need, when I came to Victoria, I still had that firebrand approach as a journalist. I remember stopping, if I couldn't get an interview, I wouldn't wait for the press conference. I would find out where that minister was and I would take the crew and I'd go there, and the media unit didn't like it because it then couldn't be crafted, it couldn't be controlled. Now, I'm not saying journalists now are any less vibrant or less able or less wanting to get that story. I'm saying because of the timing of news and the fast cycle, that ability to chase has been diminished. And we do wait now, like we wait for that morning press release and that press conference from the Premier. So from his point of view,
which is artificially created.
That's a good control mechanism
which
for
is
government.
Artificially created.
Because we're getting people now used to the fact, oh, well, around 10 o'clock, well, why don't we sometimes wait at the Premier's house? Or why don't we wait to buttonhole somebody coming in and out. And COVID has reduced our ability as a political press pack to do that because you don't have ministers coming in and out of the house all the time.
Correct.
So COVID has done many things. It has changed the media. It has changed our relationship with politicians and sporting officials. A lot of it's done on Zoom.
Yeah, it's cloaked much
Yeah,
of what was needed to
and
do.
that's potentially a little bit dangerous.
As we're seeing in America.
A
What's
little
going
bit
on
dangerous.
there? Talk to me about America. Talking about splintering. Actually, what we might do is we might wrap this up and we'll do it in a part 2. We're talking to Steve Carey, our media expert. He's been with us from day one, and we're talking about the media, the role it has, and some of the challenges it's currently facing.